And right, so first question that we got through. How can I make my application stand out when other 300 people are applying for the same position? And this is, of course, given the pandemic that we're all unfortunately in. Any views on this? Justine, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure, I can start. So as you probably all have heard before, people tend to say that recruiters spend an average of 6 seconds looking at a resume. I don't know if that's exactly true, but it's definitely going pretty quickly. So the first thing that you need to look at is having a good, well-built resume. So my first advice would be to make it short and sweet. Don't do a very lengthy 4 pages resume. It's usually not ideal. It needs to have detail, but don't make it too long. The other thing that you need to do is match your resume to the job description, to the job you're applying to. So use relevant keywords in your resume that matches the role description. Please check spelling mistakes. It shows attention to detail. It really is a big turnoff for any recruiter to look at a resume with grammatical errors and general spelling mistakes. Make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date. That's the first thing that we're going to look at as recruiters as well. But generally look at any social media as well. Just be aware of what's public and what's not, because we tend to look at other social media as well. I think it's probably a good advice. The other thing I would say to stand out is to try and message the recruiter who posted the job on LinkedIn directly. So you could message the recruiter, you could message a hiring manager with expressing your interest in the job. You will do that after applying, just making them aware that you've applied to the role, you're very interested, and explaining why you're interested in the job or in joining the company in particular. You could leverage referrals as well, look at whether or not you're potentially connected with someone who works in the company you want to join. And if so, message them directly, try and get an introduction. Networking in general is a great advice for you to get to know people in the industry, and that would open you a lot of doors. If you get a chance to interview, a general tip is do your research. You will get a conversation about why you want to join that company. Make sure you're aware of why specifically this company. Prepare questions. It shows curiosity as well, so it could give you an edge over the candidates. Be responsive throughout the recruitment process, communicate, and generally build a relationship with your recruiter. I think that will make you stand out as well. So yeah, that would be my advice.
I'm sure someone else from the panel wants to add something to that.
I just want to piggyback off what Justine said about adding keywords that are relevant to the job. But when you're doing this, be sure that they're things that you actually know, because oftentimes we see people just add words and you're going to be asked about those things. So be prepared to discuss them as well. Don't just have stuff on your resume that you don't know about or you haven't had experience with, because that can actually work against you.
Yeah, I think like Justine pretty much nailed it with all the information we needed. In general, you don't have to rewrite your entire CV every time you apply for a job to make it stand out, but you will have some key competencies. And if you do enough research into each individual role, you can just reshuffle those competencies. So for instance, maybe project management is a key part of a specific role or a key competency. Or just shuffle that related stuff up a bit further up your CV in a key skills or key competency section, just to make it more readable, more eye-catching for that specific recruiter for that specific role.
Yeah, the only thing for me that I'd add into that is what I found sometimes quite useful is if there's a summary at the top of someone's CV and it's specific to that role. So they've obviously had a look through the job description, know exactly what's in there, and in top of the key skills that someone's added, as Justine said, even just a short summary to help us understand exactly the work that you've done can be cool, really sort of key tools in making that stand out.
I guess one of other questions as well that we got before the event, and I guess it ties nicely with this topic as well, is are cover letters important? How important are they?
Yep. So, so cover letters are not always mandatory when you apply, but I personally think it's always a good idea to include one in any application that you submit. Some company will value it more than others, depending on the position you apply to, but I think it's still important for you to use. It will really help you get noticed. It can still dramatically boost your chances of landing a job, or at least land an interview. So the resume will cover the facts about what you've done in your career so far, but the cover letter gives you a chance to display your personality and motivation to join a specific company. It really tells your story, I would say. So it gives you the opportunity to elaborate on your story before getting the chance to interview. You would use it to exhibit your qualification for a job and explain what makes you a good fit, but also you could give more context around your current situation. For example, if you're new to the industry, if you have left a previous employer after a short period of time, sometimes it's something that could look bad in a resume, but you could use the cover letter to sort of explain why that is. So I would personally really highly recommend for any candidates to do it. Sometimes when a recruiter, or for example myself, sometimes I'm on the fence when reading a resume, and I would look at the cover letter to help me make a decision. If you do submit a cover letter, make sure that again, you customize it, make it relevant to the role and the company you're applying for. I think it's very important. Don't send the same cover letter to every single company out there. There's not really any added value. So I would rather you not submitting one than submitting just a general one. Be enthusiastic about the role, about the company. And again, make sure you check any grammatical error and spelling mistake. Make sure that you don't put the wrong company name on the cover letter, because that happens quite often and it doesn't look very good.
Yeah, I think a CV provides information about your career, and I think a cover letter provides context to that information. It's also a good opportunity, as Justine said, around personality. It's a lot easier to put kind of almost emotional content into a cover letter, what you're excited about, where you want your career to go, what's exciting about this role for you. It's hard to put that in a CV, but in a covering letter is a perfect kind of way to couch that information. So it is useful. The only, I suppose, counterpoint to that is if you're a graduate or you're looking for a career change and you are looking for you're applying to multiple roles, a cover letter can maybe be seen as a blocker, having to write an individual covering letter for say 20 companies if you're in that part of your career. You can still make it modular. You can have a kind of a relatively standard intro and a relatively standard outro, and then just make unique that central block that's really unique to that company. But as Justine says, it has to be unique, or there isn't an additional value point to it.
I definitely. Oh, sorry, you go. No, you go. Yes, okay.
I think the main thing to take away is it's really important to have this cover letter specific to the job that you're applying to and the company in which you're applying to and why. Because again, when we get the generic cover letters, again, you have no idea how many times there's a different company name or different role attached to it, and it just automatically kind of discredits your candidacy, truthfully. So making sure that you're customizing the cover letters to that specific job and to that specific company is probably the most important thing about a cover letter. Go ahead, Peter.
No, you kind of took the bit I was going to say as well, but sort of added up to it anyway. Like, I think for me, I'd just be saying, if you're in two minds of writing a cover letter, better have one than not. It ties into how you can make yourself stand out. Not everyone looks through them. The honest truth, I've not always looked through cover letters. I've gone straight to CVs before, but you are better off having one than not, because you'll have that case where someone does look through them and that does make the change. And you don't want to be in a position where that could have helped you across the line, get to the interview, and not have written one. So definitely, +1 to everything they've said there as well, the others.
And talking about standing out, how can networking help us get a job at a company, or can it actually help us?
I'll take this one. I think networking it can make the difference in getting the job and not getting the job. Oftentimes it's a good way to get your foot in the door, start a brand for yourself within the organization, and really start building those relationships to have a successful career within the organization. And the worst case scenario, if you don't get the job, you met some really good people that maybe down the line there is some opportunity for you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, especially right now during the time of COVID, there's a lot of people looking for a job out there. So it ties into the how to stand out question we had before. But really, for all of us, all the recruiters here on the call, I'm sure each one of us have many, many different stories of people we've hired because we've met them at an event, whether it's a meetup or boot camp or whatever that is, or someone in our company met someone and recommended them, and they're just getting through the process as a priority because, you know, someone, either ourselves or someone else, had a personal connection with them and can recommend them. So sometimes, you know, the CV doesn't necessarily tick all the boxes, but by meeting someone or having a conversation with someone, you know they're right for the job. So I would highly recommend doing that. It's probably a bit less easy now that we're all remote and there's less events out there that you can take part in. But you know, you can also message someone on LinkedIn that is doing the job, your dream job. And I'm sure most people out there will be happy to have a conversation with you and give you advice on, you know, what's the best way to upskill, how to get into the company they're trying to get into, etc. So yeah, probably the best advice out there, I would say right now.
Yeah, I'd add on to that as well. Like, think of networking as not just a way to get into a company, but if maybe you're taking that transition in a career, then it's a great way to learn areas to upskill in that are recognized as well. It's so hard to know about skills to pick up or specific bodies, like governing bodies, where they might give certificates that would be really well recognized without actually being in that area. And in going to networking events or reaching out to people on LinkedIn and taking that opportunity and having that learning is something that you just wouldn't be able to pick up, I don't think, elsewhere. So it would be such a great tool to use in networking in that route as well. It's such a useful way to take it into the less traditional.
It's quite empowering as well. It is a proactive thing you can do with your career. I think looking for roles can often be seen as quite passive. You wait around for a vacancy and then you apply and you wait, and somebody else dictates sort of what's happening. You know, you can't be afraid to get yourself out of there. There will be roles underneath the surface that maybe haven't been advertised yet or budgeted for quite yet. So using LinkedIn the way a recruiter will use LinkedIn, not like a social tool, but like a database, you know, find the people that have the dream jobs in the locations, make a list of the companies that those people work in, and do a bit of research and then reach out to them proactively and just speculatively put yourself out there. It kind of empowers you as a job seeker rather than waiting for that perfect vacancy to pop up.
Yeah, and just to chime in there, my personal experience is absolutely amazing with networking. So all my jobs in my career, I've gotten them because of networking as well. Obviously, send a CV, and I did all the standard things. But for different reasons, I was either connected with someone at the company that made an introduction, or I actually found out about the job because someone knew someone. So yeah, networking, it is very powerful, especially in these times. But at the same time, it's not easy to network when you cannot go to in-person events. But then thankfully there are still online events, and if we break out into smaller rooms as well, and there are different communities as well where you can still meet people. But yeah, it is tough. It's not the best time to network either. Right, so we have a few questions as well on the chat. So I'm just going to go through this as well. If someone prefers to unmute themselves and read out the question, feel free to do so. I don't have to read them out for you if you don't want. So I'm going to start with the first one at the top. Pinar. So hello, I am Pinar, and I'm in a career transition. And there's been a few questions around this down at the bottom. I would love to get some insights as to how to break into tech without a tech background. And there were a couple of questions down below as well that were asking the same thing. How do I get into tech? How do I change the career if I don't have any tech background? Anyone from the panel wants to take this one?
I can take a stab at it. For me, I think it's such a tough area because you find yourself in a catch-22. Like, you have to have experience to get into the area. If you don't have experience, if you're not in the area, you can't get the experience. And it kind of goes back a bit to what I was saying about networking and understanding specific areas that you can upskill in, and certificates or qualifications you can get to try and build yourself into that. And then using those, you can almost try and see if there are any internships or anything like that. And I think if you're taking a transition, sometimes you have to take a step back to take 2 steps forward, and it can be really difficult from just I'm not saying anyone's egotistical, but just from an ego side, if you have to take such a step back. But I think when you look at a career, you almost, if you want to take a career change, you almost have to look at it and say, okay, I'm starting here from scratch. What would I have done if I was to do that again, coming out of university or what? And look at where you can build those experiences up.
Hi, Belen. Shall I ask a question here? I have posted a few. Okay, thank you very much for your insights. It's really helpful. One question from my side is, if for a mid-career person who just because of immigration to some other country, not able to get into a job for some reasons due to visa permission, stuff like that, how can he get back to work? Do you think any certifications? What is your general opinion on people who take a break from work and then getting back to work? Can someone point out?
I think certifications are absolutely really important. We want to know what you've been doing in that time away from work. Have you taken initiative on your own to stay on top of the technology and really keep up? Because as we all know here, things are constantly changing. So it's important to show that you're still taking initiative, you're still learning and still doing something in that time away. Certifications definitely help that are specific towards whatever role it is that you're looking to get into. But again, I think self-studying and taking that initiative, whoever's interviewing is going to want to know what you've been doing during your time away. And you can kind of showcase that in a cover letter, in a summary, address it ahead of time, list your certifications when you got them on your resume so that people are aware of what you've been doing during your time away. Okay.
In that case, freelancing work could also help, right? Trying to get in pace with the same field by doing some freelancing work will also help, right? Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other comments from anyone?
If you're in the software space, there's a lot of ways to contribute to open source communities, and employers can do that as well. So if you are in the software space, GitHub contributions, that's very, very useful as well. But that's a bit more specific to the software space.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Makes sense.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Yeah.
Hi, Belen. Can I just piggyback off of that because my point is directly relevant to what Hani mentioned. So I have been volunteering with a couple of NGOs and also completing my bootcamp certification. But I have had about 4 or 5 years experience in several other fields. And, I'm kind of in a similar position where I emigrated from a different country, but I was also a graduate student in this country. And then, thereafter, I've worked with e-commerce and stuff. But now I'm looking to transition, and this transition has been going on for like a year and a half now, where I started with a workshop initially. I just kind of got my feet wet and then decided, okay, fine. fine, let me go forward. And then, of course, the pandemic accelerated the process of transition. So if you could be, say, a little more specific of how I should be wording my voluntary projects on my resume, that would really help, because I've just had so much advice on this and I've been going back and forth and in circles, literally trying to reword it. So just to make it sound more professional on my resume, to be honest, now I'm at this point where I'm just confused. Like, what should my wording be for a voluntary project or a bootcamp project? Should I be listing it as freelance? Should I be listing it as voluntary project? Or what is the best way to put it? You know, if you could just, help with that.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on this one. So I think I'm happy to have a look at that personally as well. If you wanna have a second, third, or fourth opinion, you can send it over and we can have a look, and then we can let you know what our thoughts are specifically. But I think all experience matters. And if you're trying to break into a new industry, trying to break into tech, you need to put that there and don't ask for any forgiveness. You can always explain what this is about. So do not undersell yourselves, because sometimes we just tend to be like, right, I'm gonna be careful because this was just a voluntary project. I'm gonna add that this was just maybe 2 hours a week. No, don't worry. You want to get the recruiters hooked as well. And I'm just trying to go from the other side now. So just write that obviously truthful CV, because as Brittany said, you're gonna be asked about that. But you're also trying to kind of sell yourself with a CV. So do not overthink it too much. Just write something that you think is gonna catch the recruiter's attention. And I wouldn't worry too much about adding, right, I've done, 2 hours here, 3 hours here. I've done this for, you need to add the time, the period of time and everything. But I would just take that opportunity as well to kind of incite the recruiters to call you up and to send you an email. I worked in talent for many years as well, and maybe they can respond now, but I would not feel offended if someone sends the CV and actually, oh, it looks interesting, and then I call you up and then you tell me, all right, this was actually, I did this, and you explain it in more detail. So the CV needs to tell a story, but it doesn't need to tell everything. It needs to give that, kind of incentivize the recruiter as well to get back to you, because it's a way of standing out. So voluntary projects and everything, you can stand out through that. But do not ask for permission to add these things. Just go for it. But I'll let I can see Luke and Brittany trying to chime in as well. So.
I was about to say, you probably got different advice whether or not to put it as a freelance or voluntary experience, just because I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. I don't think it matters that much how you word it, but I would say it's definitely a valuable experience. It shows good signals on the variety of values as well, that you put a lot of time and effort into those experiences. I would say something that could help you is to sort of manage to relate those voluntary experiences to the role you're applying to, what you got out of it that could help you in that job that you're targeting in particular, because there's definitely always things that you take away from those experiences, and try to elaborate on those, I would say.
Thank you.
And again, if you want to send it over, I'm sure one of us can have a look and give you another opinion.
Absolutely, yeah, I would love to do that. Should I reach you through Meetup?
Yeah, I can leave my email here as well. I can message you and then you can send it.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thanks.
Right, so we have some more questions here from Lee. Hi, I'm Lee from New York. Hi, Lee. Making a career change into tech as well. I was wondering, what is the opinion about coding bootcamp graduates within the industry and recruiters? So what do you all think about bootcamps?
I've worked with a number of boot camps over the years here in Scotland and in other parts of the world as well. They are. I think first of all, they're a big leveler. I think fundamentally, it costs money to get yourself educated to a certain degree, and not everyone has that money. And you know, it is a root cause of social inequality. Let's put it that way. So I think anything that will sort of level the playing field and make this knowledge more accessible to more people, I think is fantastic. It very much is what you make of it, and there's not one type of code camp out there. So I would say don't treat it like a catch-all type of education in the same way university education would be. Definitely, certainly do your research into the local boot camps and what they offer. A lot of the time they have different commercial relationships as well, so that different commercial models. So some of them ask for a certain amount of money from you up front. Some of them ask for a lot less money, but then you will have to work with them, with their other organizations, partner organizations, for a number of months. So make sure that that setup works for you. But fundamentally, you know, there's nothing. I don't think a recruiter would turn their nose up at a code camp engineer if they've done the work and they've studied and they've got a short project that they usually come away with to show for it. I think they can be really, really valuable.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Peter, I think at the end of the day, what's most important is what you've learned from that boot camp and the knowledge that you took away and the skills that you have now because of that boot camp. Truth is, now it's a lot less degrees. I don't want to say this out loud, but experience and skills are a lot more important than where you got it from. What you can do is a lot more important. So, and oftentimes you'd be surprised. Some organizations actually partner with boot camps to get some of their internships or, you know, their early career groups filled. So it can also open doors to other opportunities after boot camp. So again, just echoing what everybody here is saying, I don't think recruiters in most cases turn their nose up to boot camps.
No, I'd literally just plus onto that. Like, again, it's just about experience. You know, it doesn't so much matter where you got it from. I know what Brittany was about to say. I never went to university. Okay, I'm not an engineer. Okay, but I never went to university. And I just think like it's about what the experiences you got and what you can do with it so much as where it came from. And if you're, imagine, amazing software developer and you've been experienced in it for 5 years compared to maybe someone that's just left Cambridge University, realistically, they're going to take the person that's proven they can do the job. And if two people get to an interview, it's going to be, okay, who performs better? It's not going to be looked at, okay, well, this person got an education from here or something. So yeah, I just exactly what the others said, really.
Kind of leads back
I think as well.
Sorry, I know.
No, go ahead.
I was just, another thing is that it leads back to the networking piece as well. You're going to be immediately entering into a community of people who are like-minded and looking for the same things. And oftentimes the alumni of these code camps will be working with the companies that are really attracted to these types of candidates. So you're immediately building this little shortlist of companies that are going to be, interested in your skill set. So it leads back to that proactive networking piece we spoke about earlier.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that as well, I think in terms of boot camps versus university degrees, both are obviously more than helpful. And what companies have done in the last few years as well, there were some companies years ago that were asking specifically for people to have specific degrees to get into certain positions. And we're seeing that a lot of companies are moving away from that, which it does not undermine those who go to university to get computer science degrees and IT degrees, because the knowledge and the vast experience that you get there also is going to be very helpful for you to start your career and get to where you want to as well. Boot camps are in a smaller period of time, they're more specific, and they're also as helpful, but you obviously will get 4 years of a degree and 3 months of bootcamp is different. But as everyone mentioned here, neither is like right or wrong. Like companies nowadays, they're not gonna reject, most of the companies. And if a company rejects you because you don't have a degree, probably you don't want to work there either. So you should be happy about that. Yeah, and the other thing as well is bootcamps and university degrees as well, but specifically bootcamps are very expensive, and there's a bit of like catch 22, and this is one of the reasons as well as to why we started Wagora as well, to remove financial barriers from actually either trying to move into tech or upskill when you're actually working in tech. Some of those prices, bootcamps, are quite extortionate. So probably, Lee, if you already done your research in New York, there are bootcamps from $8,000 to like 14 grand. In the UK, probably like 5 to like 10. Thankfully, there are some organizations that do free bootcamps, but those are in very high demand because obviously it's quite good to get something for free. And that's the biggest like catch as well. There are some companies as well that they're developing their own like bootcamps. So for example, at CloudReach, we have something called Fast Track, where we welcome applicants from all backgrounds. There's people from like non-technical backgrounds, and we do a bootcamp for like 12 weeks. And then actually during those 12 weeks, you're actually an employee already. So you get paid for being 12 weeks doing a bootcamp. Not a lot of companies do that, but there are some out there as well. And then from the back of this as well, at Wagora, actually yesterday, we just launched a new bootcamp, which I'm gonna leave here in case you're interested. It's a free part-time bootcamp on cybersecurity. So if you are interested in getting into tech as well, we are running a new bootcamp, and there'll be more coming. And our idea is to make this accessible for those who want to move into tech or get different skills as well. So have a look there as well. Right, I'm just scrolling up because there's quite a lot of questions and I got a bit lost here. Right, Yoyu. So question from Yoyu. The EU European rules make it very difficult for companies to hire candidates from outside Europe. As a recruiter, what do you do to make sure you hire the right talents while adhering to the rules? And what do you think will happen after January 2020? I guess she means after Brexit in the UK. Anyone wants to take this one?
I guess I can talk from, I suppose, the Google perspective on it, and again, I can talk from maybe a position of privilege here, where we don't have issues when it comes to things around visa sponsorship. Google's focus is hiring. The philosophy we have in hiring is basically we're here to hire the best person for the job, regardless of where they are, where they come from, socio-economic backgrounds, anything like that. It doesn't even come into the conversation. Our focus is hiring the best person for the job, and that really, I suppose, comes through into when we do our interviews. And the only thing you really do as interviews is make sure you're prepared. You've done your research. You know what there is. You feel you technically able to do it, and then you give your best at it. And I think companies, it's a difficult one because different companies have different policies, but for us anyway, like we wouldn't be even considering those sort of backgrounds as a blocker or a barrier to entry. It would be really just who's best.
Yeah, as Peter said, it's very, very company specific. At Improbable, it's a bit like Google, I would say. We haven't really changed anything recently around hiring people outside of the EU, etc. in terms of visa sponsorship. I think it's still also a bit unclear to everybody what's going to happen after Brexit, because it's still a bit up in the air right now. So we just keep going business as usual, and we've committed to, you know, sponsor or whatever we need to do for our current employee that would need any type of work permit post-Brexit, then we'll make that happen for them. So for us, it hasn't really changed anything, but who knows? I don't know what it's like in your company. Look, Brittany, is a bit less relevant for you, I guess, being in the US.
Klarna is very similar. Yeah. You know, they're going through hyper growth. Now, the larger companies have obviously the benefit of a more mature HR function. So they will have specialists who are able to manage sponsorship, and they will have budgets, and they will be able to project those budgets into the future. Whereas maybe startups or slightly smaller business may struggle to find that talent. But fundamentally, you know, the challenge that we face, as I think most of these businesses do, is finding the talent in the first place. The fact that someone's not in the EU is a much smaller barrier than actually finding and attracting the right talent. So you know, Klarna, depending on the location, you know, there's up to between 60 and 80% of the hires in Stockholm are relocators, and about roughly half of them are outside of the EU. But what I would say on the other side of it, from a candidate point of view, is perfectly to echo what you said. It is very company specific. Go back to your recruiter, ask them what they have to offer. Ask them do they have a relocation package? Do they have a HR team? Is there a lead time for these sponsorships? Do they get a certain amount per year? How does it work in that company, in that location? There's nothing wrong with asking those questions.
Thank you.
Hi, Belen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Belen. Sorry. I would ask you a favor. Is it possible to extend this panel discussion for another hour? Because is the panelists, because I think there are a lot of questions here.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions, and it's okay. What we'll do is when we hit the hour mark, we probably extend it for about 10 minutes or so, and then we can get into smaller rooms, so we can still carry on with the discussion in smaller groups.
Okay.
And then we will also, if there are a lot of unanswered questions, we can do another event like this, because I think these ones are very helpful. And it's actually, I'm sure Brittany, Justine, Luke, and Peter are up for another event like this. So I'm sure we can do something. And then I will also, look, you've got their names and surnames here, so feel free to add them on LinkedIn as well. And I will leave a generic email address here in case someone has any questions or specific help that anyone needs, and then we can help with that afterwards as well. So yeah, back to that. We'll do this for about 20 more minutes. We'll get into smaller rooms, and then don't worry, you'll be able to either connect with them or just send an email over to me, and then we can help you with anything else.
Thank you very much.
Right, so I'm going to go to the next question. Well, Brittany, you have a specific question for you. This is the first time it happens so far. So what's the advice that you can give to a fresh graduate who wants to start a career in DevOps? What are the key skills to gather first?
Well, there's a lot of skills, truthfully, that go into DevOps. But I think probably my best recommendation would be to find somebody that's already in a DevOps role at maybe a company that you're interested in working at, or just in general in a DevOps engineering role, and talk to them about their day-to-day. What kind of skill sets do they look for when they're adding to the team? Because DevOps means a lot of things to a lot of different things to a lot of different companies and organizations and schools and all sorts of different things. So it's kind of a hard question to answer, but I think my best advice would be find another engineer that's currently doing that type of work that you're interested in doing, and pick their brain. Sit down with them for 10, 15 minutes and just ask them about what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, what type of skills they had to learn to be successful in that role. I mean, I could go through some buzzwords for you, but truthfully, at the end of the day, that's all they are, is buzzwords. So I think that's probably the best starting point.
Yeah, look into mentorship programs as well, whether it's formal or informal. So as Brittany said, either you connect with someone on LinkedIn or someone who would meet at an event that is doing the job you want to get into and get advice from them. Or there are some companies out there offering mentorship, connecting you with someone that is relevant to what you're trying to achieve. And that is usually a very good way to do that as well.
DevOps community in general is really strong. Sorry, Brittany, on you go.
No, I actually was going to call on you because I know you've spent some time in DevOps. So I was going to give you an opportunity.
Yeah, I kind of cut my teeth on DevOps back when sort of systems administrators would just change their job title to DevOps and hope for the best. But there is a massive community, a really strong community globally for DevOps, mainly because, as Brittany said, it's not a bunch of technologies, it's a way of doing things. And because it is a bit more of a philosophy to the way you approach technology, there's a pretty strong kind of community built around it. And a lot of the initial material is quite accessible, the Phoenix project and the DevOps handbook and, the Eli Goldratt books and all of this. Really, really good, easy, consumable way to understand the DevOps first principles. But generally, there will be a DevOps meetup somewhere. When COVID's over, go meet a bunch of people. They love talking about DevOps. And it is still a massively growing part of the tech space as well. So it is pretty relevant for your career.
Actually, not to throw my own company out there, but Do It International, we do a lot of DevOps related meetups virtually and just talks. I know we're going to be doing a bunch of stuff related to DevOps for AWS reInvent. So check out our website and some of the upcoming events that we have, and there may be some stuff that's relevant to what you're looking for.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Brittany, if you want to leave you a link here or something, feel free to leave the link to the events as well. Then I was also gonna mention the reInvent. So AWS is one of the biggest cloud services providers out there, alongside Google. Peter, don't worry, GCP. But there is the AWS reInvent going on for 3 weeks now, and it's free for everyone. So I would absolutely recommend, if you want to get into DevOps or anything cloud related, take this opportunity, because it's a remote event. Usually it happens in Las Vegas every year, and to get a ticket, it's impossible, and also a lot of money. So I would 100% recommend for you to get there. So if you just Google AWS reInvent, you should get to that page. Then I'm going to leave as well another link here. We don't get any commission, but this is a good website, Cloud Guru. So they have a lot of courses, and they have a free membership version where you get access to some limited courses. Then you have some paid versions as well. But this will give you a good insight into more, cloud. DevOps can mean a lot of things, but here you will see the courses that DevOps engineers type thing would go and do. I think getting started with a public cloud, whether that is AWS, Azure, or Google, GCP, that would be a good start. So have a look there. We also have an upcoming AWS bootcamp as well to Wagora, but it'll be announced next year. But just keep an eye out on the website as well, and then you'll see that coming. Yeah, cool. All right, so we have more questions up here. Let me just go back to the top. What would be the best way to break into tech as a non-tech person? I'm a self-taught career changer. I've studied data science for almost a year now, but I have difficulty to even get any interviews. What kind of path would you suggest to make this journey a little easier and more effective? Well, hopefully, Pinar, what we said, it has helped you to get an overview as to what you can do to stand out as well. I don't know if anyone has anything to add on to that. I would say data science is a great field. It's very high in demand. And again, I'm happy to drop my email there if you want to send us your CV over, we can have a look and help you out, give you some advice on that, and feel free to connect with us. And feel free to unmute yourself, by the way, now. But hopefully we've given you some tips as to how to break into a career or stand out. If anyone wants to add anything else, feel free to unmute yourself, or feel free to, yeah. Next question. We've answered this one. What is your experience in dealing with candidates with a PhD? Over the years, in your experience, is it positive, negative, and how many candidates have you hired with a PhD?
Well, I would ask for more context as to why you think that would be an issue. I guess there's probably a reason why you're asking that question. Personally, I guess my answer may not be of great help for you, because I am probable we have a lot of research roles, research-focused roles, for which we hire only people with PhD. So the only time I've hired someone with a PhD is because it was a requirement for the role. So it's never been an issue before. I would never turn down a candidate because they have a PhD. So if you're on the call, if you want to add a bit more context to your question, maybe?
The thing was, like, I have heard with most external recruiters are not keen on hiring PhDs. It might be a misconception that I've heard from people around me.
Yeah, I don't know about other recruiters on the call, but I personally, no.
For me, it'd be an indifference. Like, again, it's, how do you perform in an interview? It's not saying that university degrees don't matter, because obviously they do. And if you have a PhD, then it shows a lot of different disciplines to you as a person. But like, it wouldn't be a make or break for me. Again, it would just come down to who's performed best in an interview and who's got the ability.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Next question. Honey, I think you already answered this one about companies who receive a high number of applications, but let us know if you want to elaborate on that as well.
No, Belen, I have asked specifically for these FAANG companies.
Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
FAANG is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google.
Okay. So I guess Peter can take this one.
Yeah, you see the question. When going to FAANG companies who receive thousands of resumes, what would be your advice to get shortlisted for interviews? Are there some same tips applicable for them too? Sorry, I ran through that question quite quickly there. In short, yeah, exactly the same. So for me as a recruiter in Google, we might see on average per role, you can look at maybe 500 to 1,000 applications per role. So again, it's just the simple things that make you stand out. So I think Justine mentioned it perfectly earlier, and I suppose we all have really, but just making sure it's simple things, like make sure if you're going to write something, have it specific to the role. Don't have spelling mistakes. If you send something to Google, don't have written in there like, yes, I'm interested in this position at Facebook. Make it specific to the group. And again, having those keywords that we spoke about at the start, even that cover letter, if you didn't do a cover letter, have a summary at the top of your CV. Have something there that just summarizes who you are, what you're about, what experiences you have. And those are the things. There's really there's no algorithms that we have. Everyone that reviews a CV is a person in Google. So I imagine it's the same, because I've got friends in Facebook and I used to work in Amazon. So it's always people reading these things. So I just use the same tips, if I'm honest.
Thank you, Peter. Hopefully, Honey, that has answered your question. We're gonna go through a few more, and then we're gonna break out into smaller groups as well to keep answering some questions. One question here: what is the criteria? What criteria do you base on when granting Wagora membership? So, for context, on the website, Wagora website, you can become a member. It's free, but we do ask for 48 hours or so to just review the membership. It is just basically to know that it's a real person, really. So as you can see, we ask you for either like a GitHub profile or LinkedIn. We just want to avoid having like spam emails there. And since it's a new website, done as an MVP, really, we don't have any automated process there to send a message to your mobile and get the code through as well. So we just have that to just ensure that it's a real person, really. There is nothing else behind that. Other questions here from Sherry. I'm switching career from a project manager in education to a project manager Scrum Master role in IT after getting a Scrum Master certification. Most Scrum Master jobs I've seen require 3 to 5 years or from a developer background. What would your advice be to change careers like me to enter the IT sector? I think this has been partly answered earlier when we were discussing. Yeah, indeed, it was difficult, and Peter was saying that it was a bit of like catch-22. But in this case, I think the difference is that you've done a similar role in another industry, and you want to switch to the IT industry. I don't know if anyone on the panel has any insights on this specific case. Any advice, because you already have relevant experience, but not the relevant industry experience.
You could potentially take advantage of your domain knowledge in the education sector. You know, there could be the education technology is pretty explosive sector just now, so you could potentially take advantage of that domain knowledge, and you know that would have additional value to like an ed tech, you know, like a learning management system or something like that. Off the top of my head.
Thank you. Hopefully that has answered your question. What are some resources, websites, which you recommend for software engineers to have a look before attending an interview? Usually, I get referred Geek4Geeks, Glassdoor, any other popular resources, books, websites.
In preparing for an interview, correct? Or is that the right context?
To have a look before attending an interview.
Yeah. LinkedIn, definitely. Research the people that you're going to be interviewing with to understand their background, what they do at the company. Ask your recruiter questions too. Ask for those details from your recruiter about your interviewer, and make sure that you're researching the people that you're going to be connecting with. As much information as you can find on the company. What does the company do? Who are some of the company's partners? What do they specialize in? A lot of that you can get from the website, from blogs. There's typically a lot of different resources on the company website that you can use to your advantage. But I definitely recommend checking out LinkedIn, the different people that are working at the organization within LinkedIn, and really taking your time to do some dedicated research. And again, asking your recruiter questions. Your recruiter can be your best resource for prepping for interviews.
Yeah, and I would say if you have already your interviews scheduled and lined up and you know more or less what they're going to be about, there's loads of exercises that you can do online to sort of rehearse for technical interviews. There's some on HackerRank, there's some on LeetCode that you can do. You know, if, for example, your interview will be using you know, binary search for your algorithm or whatnot. There's some podcasts as well that are helpful to understand those things, like Ladybug podcast or Base.cs podcast as well. So yeah, there's loads of resources online I don't have any other specific example in mind, but if you want to drop us an email, I'm sure we can collect some resources for you, but there's loads online.
Sure,
you.
that would be helpful. Thank you.
There is another question that was sent over through us privately as well, which I'm going to read now. How can I know if the company has real diversity and inclusive policies during the hiring interview process, and it's not just all talk? How can I spot the sexist one?
It's a very interesting question, and also a quite difficult one to answer. Diversity is a bit of a buzzword right now, so every single company out there will try and communicate on diversity initiatives or put a few things on the website. I would say, ask a lot of questions during the interview process about what actual actions the company has implemented related to diversity and inclusion. It's not just words on the website. What have they actually done? If you get to interview with some diversity interviewers as well, ask them. It's usually also a good sign if there's some diverse interviewers in your panel. If your panel is just made up of white male, that's probably usually a pretty bad sign as well. So that's, ask questions, ask for evidence. That's the main thing. How do you spot sexism? I don't know if you can do that specifically during an interview process. But yeah, that's probably the first advice I would give you, is really to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah,
one thing I'd
go.
Okay. We keep doing this. Simply us. So I suppose there's a couple of things I would be doing if I was in that situation. And Justine talked about it perfectly there about asking questions. And one thing I'd say is, and I say this to everyone that comes through for interviews, don't forget that this isn't just the company's time to interview you, but it's your turn to interview them. And you've got to make sure that, going to a job interview, going to a job opportunity, it's not a one-sided thing. You need to make sure, is this the right culture for me? Is there enough career development? Is the trajectory going to be right? Is this really where I want to be going? All these different questions. So, Justine said it perfectly. Just make sure you're asking questions on it. On the second point, I'd just say, do your research. The internet is a place where, look, there's a lot of fake stuff written, there's a lot of true stuff written, but it's essentially an unfiltered forum. So really do your research into these things. Look up not just the company website, but even just writing into a search, X company's DEI strategy, X company diversity, really hone in your research, because unless you're actually within there, it's hard to gauge, any of those points that you mentioned. So I'd really focus on research.
I was just going to say what Peter said. Oftentimes you can find a lot of information online by doing research on LinkedIn, looking at the different types of people that they hired based on their employees on LinkedIn can be a really helpful resource, and asking questions during your interview. Recently, I get asked that question a lot. And the way that the company responds and what their diversity and inclusion and everything that goes along with that is very intentional nowadays. You have to be very intentional about these things, especially in the tech industry. It's not something that it's just going to happen for an organization. So it's something that you have to have an intentional strategy around. But again, like Peter said, ask those questions during your interview. It's a mutual fit for both parties. It's not just an organization's chance to interview you and make sure that you're the right fit for the company. It's also your opportunity to make sure that this is somewhere that you really want to work and invest your time in. So ask those questions, and don't just ask the recruiter, ask every person along the way if that's something that's really important to you. Chances are you're not just going to talk to one person during your interview process. Ask the hiring manager, the person that you're directly going to be working for and working with. Talk to them about it and see how important it is for them. And that answer alone will tell you a lot.
Yeah, look at Glassdoor reviews as well. As Peter said before, there's fake reviews, but usually reviews from former angry employees, but there's always a bit of truth in every single review that you can find. So have a read through that, and you can potentially spot any flags around that if there's any.
Thank you. We have a few more questions, and we kind of ran over the 1 hour mark. I'm happy to keep going with a few more questions because I think they all look so interesting that I feel bad stopping. But I know maybe some of the panelists might need to leave. So if you need to leave, don't worry. Don't feel pressure to stay on because I know you've got some stuff to do. But if you want to stay on, we can do this for 10 more minutes, and then we'll definitely get into smaller groups in a bit. But I think there's very interesting questions here, so probably can go over 3 more or so. Is that okay with you? Cool. Right, so I got a bit lost now with where we were with the questions. Let me see.
Len, in this case, can I ask my question? I've sent it on the group chat as well, but since all the panelists are here, I'll just take this opportunity to ask in person. So I've been working with the traditional bank for over 10 years, and I'm very interested in switching to fintech. I do believe that I have the right skill sets. However, during the interview, I get asked over and over again, they're like, why do you want to switch to a startup environment? And I told them that I'm ready for the jump. I'm actually, there's nothing that I'm not happy about my current job, but I do feel that the future is with technology, and I think fintech is a very interesting industry. However, it seems like they were not convinced. And so I just want to ask the panelists here, what would be a more convincing answer if I get asked in an interview again?
Yeah, I'd like to take this one because oftentimes, I'm currently scaling a startup and came from that as well. And oftentimes there are people that come from a more traditional corporate background, and they're wanting to make that change into a more startup environment. And I also ask that question. I think it is about how you answer that question. And truthfully, in a startup, we're looking for entrepreneurs, people that are okay with coloring outside the lines and going outside of the scope of the job, and don't have to take the initiative on their own. Do take the initiative on their own. They don't have to be told to take the initiative and do things on their own. So I think it's more about the culture and the mindset and how you like to work and the type of environment you like to work in and the scope of the job. So oftentimes what I say to candidates that are applying is, no offense to Peter, but if you want to go work at Google or AWS or one of these really, really big organizations, that's great. But the impact that you can have on a smaller startup like here or other startups in the world is a lot greater. The footprint that you leave, you just have a lot more ability. So I think talking about the things that excite you and really showing the excitement in your words is going to be key to that question.
That is great too, because I feel like they always ask, why do you want to switch? And they ask me to explain my passion for my past experience. But if all my past experiences were covered, then it wouldn't be a good answer for them. So I feel like I'm caught in this dilemma.
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily about like the company that you've worked at in a past experience, but if you can talk about the impact that you had on a certain project or whatever it may be, then it's more about the impact versus the experience, I think, and in a startup.
Right.
Again, no offense, Peter, we love Google, but just saying.
I came from a startup environment myself, so I'd actually add like loads onto what you said there. I think you're so bang on in what you said, and I think for me, if I was sat on the other side of that table, and asking someone that question and expecting a response, I'd be really looking for you to sort of show that motivation. It's not to say the areas aren't compatible across, because I know myself from the work I've done in Google that into some areas we look at banking across. We look at data analysts. We hire a lot of data analysts coming from finance into areas like trust and safety, which is looking at different areas of the internet, bad actors and such. And it's really just like, what's the motivation? So truly what interests you about this? So yes, you're in traditional banking, you're moving over, but what's that wow moment for you that says, this is why I want to do fintech? And if you can share that, and when people really want something, the passion comes through. And if you can show exactly that this is my motivation, this is, this was the wow moment maybe I had, and I went, right, I want to get into this area because it's the future and I really feel that I can make a difference. I see everyone using all the different fintech companies, I won't name them all, but I can see all of us using these different things, Revoluts and such, and I really want to be a part of what that future holds. If you can show that motivations, then the idea of coming across really shouldn't be something that will concern an employer.
Yeah, I would add to that you probably need to anticipate any concern that the recruiter could have around going from a corporate environment into a startup. As a recruiter, the few questions I'm asking myself usually when I come across a profile like yours is this person able to deal with ambiguity? I think is a big thing in startup and scale up. It's like sometimes you don't really know what you're doing. You're entering a sort of a happy mess and you need to figure out a lot of things on your own. And sometimes when you come from a very corporate, very structured environment, that could be a bit of a cultural shock. How are you able to deal with that? And I think, by addressing those concerns up front before even your recruiter asking them, it's usually a good sign. So it's really about, being in a very fast-paced environment, dealing with ambiguity, being able to go above and beyond the remit of your role. All those things are usually, lack of processes, how you deal with that, lack of support, being very autonomous. Those are the things that probably your recruiter may have a question mark around. So yeah.
This is great information. Thank you for the answers. And if anyone in this room who is coming from a similar background would like to connect, add me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Sorry, shall I ask sorry, carry on.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to pitch in, and it's my question and my thoughts were regarding the same question basically that was asked right now, and thoughts from Brittany and Peter and Justin. They pretty much align with what I think. So I come from a startup and a mid-scale organization background, wherein I have gotten an exposure working as a developer, QA, and then transitioning into the business analyst and product manager roles. So because of the size of the organization that I belonged to, I pretty much got an exposure and a wider horizon, and was very fortunate enough to have that. I have 6 years of industry experience as a BA and a product manager. So the thing that I have experienced is when I recently moved to Ireland, when I start applying for positions, I usually think that the interview goes great, but the age barrier maybe becomes a concern for the recruiting team. Even though I have an experience, maybe my age is not at par of what the recruiters are expecting the product manager position should fill. So I wanted to know your thoughts on that what is that the recruiters basically are looking for? Does the age become a barrier and the experience goes behind? So I wanted to know your thoughts and how one should overcome that.
So if I could just go quickly on that, because it kind of leads into one of the questions that we answered earlier, and Justine and Brittany answered in depth. Mm-hmm. If a company rejects you because, or the perception they reject you is because of age, have you actually missed out? Right? I'm going to be quite candid about that. Have you actually missed out on working for a company that you want to? Because if a company is rejecting you based on age or any other category that we could talk about, be it gender, race, or anything, you really actually haven't missed out on working in that company. And I know that's quite maybe a harsh thing to say, but I think you're probably better off not working there. Yeah. I'm based in Dublin as well, so I can talk from the Google Dublin side at least. I've said it before, we really don't look at anything in that area. What I would be looking at if I saw your CV as a product manager, I'd be going, okay, so let's see what relevant experience they have for the job. Doesn't matter, you know, if they got it recently or when. Let's have a look at, right, what relevant experiences do they have for the job, and do I think they can do it based on that? You could be 20 years old, you could be 80 years old. I'm not really couldn't care less about how old you are. I'd be looking at, have you got the relevant experience for the job? That would be how I'd look at it anyway.
All right.
Yeah, I was going to say what Peter said. For us, it's less about, truthfully, it's less about even how many years of experience you have, but what you've been doing during that time, and your depth of knowledge versus, you know, how old you are, or how many years you've been doing it. It's more about what have you been doing and in what capacity, and how does that align to what we're trying to do here. And again, kind of echoing what Peter said, like, maybe I think in the long run, they probably did you a favor.
That's true. Yeah, thank you very much for answering that. It gives me more encouragement, basically, to go for the right companies. Thank you.
Also, we can connect offline on this, considering you're in Dublin, and look at the sort of PM roles. I don't know who it would be dealing with, but we'll connect offline on it and see what there is here.
Definitely, Peter.
Thank you. One last question, and then we're going to move into smaller groups as well. Question from Alex. I quit my first and last tech job due to severe sexism. All girls of the tech team left. I want to avoid that happening again. Do you have any recommendations to spot and avoid companies with sexist or toxic culture while job hunting? Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that. No one should go through that. And then I think this question was partly answered earlier, but also I'm happy to connect with you offline as well to just have a wider conversation as to how to avoid that while job hunting. And then obviously, you know, Brittany, Peter, Justine, and Luke as well on LinkedIn. We all work at companies that thankfully they're very inclusive and diverse. So yeah, if there are any roles at these companies, we can help you with that. But feel free to reach out directly, and we can have a conversation around that. Right. So we are going to move into smaller groups as well now. So we're gonna break into rooms of like 6 or so. If you